All right, welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge Now What? I am joined today with Danny Zaslavsky. He is the dealer principal of Country Hill Motor, but more importantly, he is the co-founder of Vincue, which is an automotive software platform, which he will explain because it started at one level and now it's growing. And he has some great news that he can share as well. That on today, the recording date of this podcast, they just announced they've completed a new round of Series B funding, which he could talk about that. But we're going to talk about growing teams, building teams, and what he thinks it means to have a strategy to develop leaders. So, Danny, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glenn, thank you. Thank you very much. This is my favorite topic.
Well, that's good. Then we can have some fun doing this. So let's dive into the leadership, and we'll touch on the resources to grow your, as you're growing Vincue. But, your journey, being a successful dealer principal for your store. And I'm sure over that time you've had to promote people, put people in new positions and, set standards to say we're going to grow our team. And then you move over to Vincue and almost start from scratch again to rebuild. So talk to me about when you're looking for a leader for a team, what are some of the traits that you look for in these individuals?
One of my favorite questions lately of asking myself and then asking other people is, what's your superpower? Because I think that we each have superpowers. And at some point, I'm turning 40 next week. So at some point, like I think about the life that I've lived and then versus the life I have left to live. Right. And do I want to use my superpowers, or do I really want to focus on areas where maybe I'm not as strong? And do I want to build those up? And I think mostly the answer is I want to use my superpowers. Somebody said this, which I thought was cool. It's like in your 20s, try everything. In your 30s, figure out what you're good at. And in your 40s, take what you're good at and then go use it. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about. So in building others, actually, let me take it back to my family for a second. My kids, I have 10-year-old twin boys. If I can help them unlock their superpowers earlier in life, I think that's a huge advantage. So that's my goal with them, is to help them understand what they're really good at, and then help them figure out how to use that in the world to make the world better. My team is no different. When we work and hire people, if we can unlock and understand where they fit from there, then they can also work on their weaknesses as well and make those stronger. But superpowers come first.
I love that because I've coached individuals who are in one of my volunteering jobs. I help them who are people in job transition. And sometimes people get so hung up on a title or they get locked into certifications or a skill versus taking, as you're saying, if you take a step back for you personally and look back from your 20s and 30s, now you're breaking through, as you said, into 40. And you look for a common theme, forget the jobs, forget the titles, and just say, there has to be some sort of consistency that either you were really good at it or people came to you and it came naturally. And once you look at that, to your point, becomes your superpower. It could be, I just know how to put things together, or I see through chaos and I can figure out the direction we need, or I'm good at leading people without trying to be the leader, whatever it is, or I'm good with numbers. I think that's really key because great leaders hire people to do things they're not good at in the short term so that we can move the team forward versus I hire a bunch of people like me. So in that, then what is your superpower? Don't hide it.
I had to discover this over time. I love mentors. I love being around people whose life I can be a part of, understand, absorb, in the effort of being a better human myself. And I didn't quite understand it when I was younger, because I also didn't understand why somebody wanted to be a mentor. I always thought, well, what's in it for them? Right. And am I being used? Or like, what do I have to give them that they can't get on their own? I didn't understand it, but the pull of wanting to be at those tables was more important. So I had a friend who gave me this metaphor. He said, think of your life as a boardroom. And at that boardroom table, you bring different people. Some people are there for emotional support. Some are there to help you with maybe accounting because you suck at accounting. Some people are there to help you with business advice. Some are there to help you with marital advice. But this is a boardroom of your people. And sometimes those people need to be fired. And sometimes you need to bring on new board members of your life, but it is your room. I think the cliche way of saying it is like you are the 5 people you hang out with the most.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, it's always been, how do I continue to bring on really smart people that I believe in their why and they believe in mine? That's my superpower, quite frankly, because that's the style that has helped me build Country Hill Motors. That's the style that continues to help me build Vincue. And I think I also really like to be on the front line. I really like it. I don't like being behind it. My dad was the guy who went into a department of our dealership and would create a ruckus, thinking that he was doing something good, and go to the next department and create a ruckus. And then he would do that. Well, the problem with that is you can't scale, because when you are the agent of change, then you can't actually empower anybody to scale. He did it to the point of having a stroke. He's still around, but he's like a computer with 40% less processing power.
Right.
And I got to look at that and I go, that's not the life that I want to live for myself. And so I needed to figure out how to remain on the front line and be a change agent, but then also give people the ability to scale. And I had one of my own team members tell me, he goes, Danny, we've been a small company, a startup for a while. Now we're a scale up. And in order to truly go from a startup to a scale up, the thing that has to exist is trust. You have to trust the people around you that they have the best intent, even if they mess up. And I'm a guy that likes mantras. And so if you allow me at some point, I'll share some of these mantras that have kind of gotten me through some of this life we've been living.
Well, what struck me in that, what you just shared, is 2 things. One is that image of your father, who he has to be the one. And there are leaders that feel that I'm the only one that can make the change. Everyone needs me. And it's not, there are people, who might think of it as selfish, saying, well, if I train Danny to do my job, then they don't need me. And that's very short-sighted. Most people are just trying to get the team to succeed, but they're the ones who have to push everything out because everyone needs me. And that's a fault. And then to your other point is that idea of, as you move from startup to, as I like that, scale up, it is a sense of humility. And what I appreciate about your superpower, the second half of your superpower, is that idea of, when I ask for help or I have mentors around me and I start trusting people, it is allowing others to grow. I can grow, but you have to be very secure in yourself to not feel that every time I let you do something, I'm losing something. Does that make sense?
Totally. But I love that you said that, Glenn, because I've seen that in people I've been around, that it's like they don't let go of things because they almost think like a piece of them will be gone, or maybe they'll lose their job or whatever. But I had a manager at one point tell me, my vision was to come in here and to create a team where at some point you could look at me and say, why do you even need me anymore? Look at this amazing team. And unfortunately, that person got their wish. The reason why you bring other people to take your job is to create space for you to grow.
Yes.
That's why. Recognizing that is really important, and it's not linear. It's very dynamic. Sometimes you have to regress in a day, in an hour, in a month, and go backwards when you have a problem, and use skills that you learned years ago to fix a problem. And sometimes in a day, in an hour, in a month, you get the ability to rise above and work on instead of in. But it is dynamic, and it's both. It's not or, it's and.
Yeah, and that is something it took me a while to learn as well, until I had to. I was put in a situation where I had to let go, whether you wanted to or not. And it was freeing and scary because, as you said, if you're someone who likes to be on the front lines and all of a sudden you move back to maybe guide everyone, you lose a little bit of that. I don't want to call it a high or an energy or that buzz of being in that front lines, and all of a sudden you don't feel that you're doing as much. Reality is you're doing more because what your choices are, or your tasks or your communication is impacting more people. It
Right.
is very hard, but as you said, is that someone said to me this at one time, that you only have a certain number of hours a day. And so if you're trying to do your job and someone else's job, something loses. And you're never going to perfect your job if you're still doing other people's jobs. So focus on yours. But to your point, he also said your job should always be to replace yourself. And
Yep.
that was a very hard thing for me to understand. And I kept saying, well, why do I want to replace myself? They said, because I have other things for you to do, but I can't give them to you until you've trained someone to do what you're currently doing. And it was mind blowing. I said, oh, I'm actually hindering my growth when here I thought I was accelerating my growth.
Glenn, can I interview you for a second?
Please.
To the extent that you're willing to share, what is one or two really hard personal moments you've had in your life?
Oh, I think the hardest one was finding out my son had a medical condition that one he's going to have for the rest of his life. And, we found he had brain tumors at 3, and he went through chemo for a year and a half. They weren't cancerous, but they were tumors. So I think getting through that was incredibly hard. And it's still to this day, he's 16, but you're constantly worried about that. So I think there's that. And then just, I think one of the other ones was the idea of feeling, moving when I left college and I moved to New York City to pursue an acting career. There's that moment where you're going, I'm alone and I got to figure this out on my own. And then eventually you sort of make your mistakes and do that. So I would say those two things of realizing that, one, you can do things, you're capable. And then, you got, as my wife always says, we have to keep the whole family moving forward. So that mentality, I say it a lot, keep moving forward. I think that's one of the biggest scary and comforting things to know, is that you just got to keep going.
So thank you for sharing that with me. That is really hard. I think that, and I've shared this before, but it's something that is just so loud in my own mind. I told you I like mantras.
Mm-hmm.
I think that no one ever has accomplished anything of real impact without being pushed by pain and pulled by vision. I think it takes both.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that pain pushes and vision pulls, you have to have been drugged behind a truck and experienced some pain in your life to understand. When I was going through some tough stuff in my life, I went and did some therapy, and I asked my therapist to share. She asked me, what do you want out of this? And I said, I want to know enough of life's bad and enough of life's good, not to live ignorantly to either, but to live in the middle where I have choice. I have
Right.
choice. And that when, like, you're married, so when you can escalate an argument with your spouse, when you can de-escalate, when you can do that with a team member or with a loved one. You have
Right.
choice because you've been on both sides of it, right? When you take that and apply it to business, the pain of knowing where you came from and not wanting to go back is really important. And
Yes.
then the vision of like viscerally knowing now where I'm being pulled to, and the people or the company you need to have to accomplish those goals will continue opening doors for you. And it is not a um, it is not a fully formed future, meaning
No.
I can't take a piece of paper and form that future. What I can do is have enough of the vision to get me to that next door.
Yes. And I think that goes back to your mentor point before. because during some of those times that you're saying you went through, and when with my son, there were many people who looked at me and said, how can you do this? Like, how do you handle this? And so I always say, well, there's someone further down, I guess, or up above me. I used to call it the scale, sort of like the ladder. Someone's behind me going, how do you deal with that? And I'm like, do you see the people who are further down who are dealing with that? Like it's really that humility to say, hey, I can help you get to where I am, and I need somebody to get where I want to go. And to your point, the mentor is, you're looking at the boardroom, but eventually you have to be open that you can be on the boardroom for someone else too, who might be behind you, who are looking at where you went and said, oh my God, how did you do that, Danny?
Right.
Can you help me get there? So I think that's also for your team members too, is being open to and humble enough to help them get to a certain level, instead of, you should know this already, and get them there because someone else is helping you go further too. So I think that's a very good point.
There's a thing I learned years ago, and it was actually one of my things I thought about enough. It was the idea of I am not enough. And you can say it just like that, I am not enough. And it can be a very lonely or depressive thing to think about. But there's another version of that. You can say, I'm not enough. And therefore, I need others. I want others. Right. And that's and none of us in a company, I mean, like Vincue is a company, but we're a company of people, no different than Glenn, you having a company, or you having company over for dinner. That company ends up creating a culture, and there's a leader to the company that you have over. It's you and your wife. And in this company, there's a culture, and we protect that culture, and we lean on each other. And that idea of trust to scale is, I'm learning everything.
So let's touch on that, because that's a really good point, because I had it on here. I wanted to ask you that. So when you start a company like Vincue, usually most companies start very small, 2, 3, 4 people, and they're on board. They get it, and they're wearing multiple hats. But it's that, to your point, it's that vision that gets us through. But then as you start adding on, maybe it's a friend of one of you, and that next round of, let's say, if we just for numbers, you have 5 and now you're at 10, that's still close enough where that initial culture can be felt and we can control it. But as you said to me earlier, before we started, Vincue now has 70 employees. Now we're at a point where people are applying to the company as a job, and they don't really know you in those initial 5 or 10. They haven't lived that. So how do you, one, communicate the culture, but more importantly, how do you make sure that culture is a living, breathing thing through either processes or training or accountability? So explain that, because that's where I've talked to people and they always go, there's this curve. It's really good until we hit a certain number, and then it's hard to maintain, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. It's a recipe. I'll give you one of those ingredients. On Fridays, we do what's called a shout out meeting. The whole company comes together, and there's a part of the meeting where anyone who wants to gets this chance to shout out someone else. So a performance manager might shout out to a developer to say, hey, thanks for helping me create this feature for this client. Or a salesperson might shout out to somebody in operations to say, hey, thanks for getting that onboarding person on this call to help me share something that I didn't have the knowledge to share, and I also learned it. And these shout outs end up building equity within the team, because it unlocks the understanding that we lean on each other. Nobody's alone. I have a term that I used to call Gilligans or Islanders.
Right.
And so that's kind of a principle of our company is I don't want Gilligans. I don't want Islanders. I don't want people that says, I got this. I can do this on my own. Like, I don't need you. That's not a strength, in my opinion. And so there are certain tenets that we as a company understand that we have to trust each other. We have to lean on each other, because it's not that I don't trust you can't do it on your own, but nobody wins in the game of equity that it takes to rise all of our knowledge together if we don't work together in solving these problems. Am I making sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. But there are going to be people that are going to push back a little bit and say, and I agree with breaking down the silos. So department to department, it's all about the whole. But there are people that may hear that and say, well, doesn't that create dependency where someone doesn't do their job fully to their skill because they know, well, I can go to Danny and Danny will help me out with that. There's a fine line between doing my job completely and then moving it up to say, hey, take a look at this and give me some feedback, or together we can go further, versus not fulfill. I'm doing 80% because Danny is going to do 20%. Do you see how that might be?
What you just described is the difference between a corporate culture and a car dealership, in my opinion. At a car dealership, my entire life, I was asked to do 10 different jobs, 10 different ways, regardless of my title. I'm in corporations, often your job description is you protect. And when somebody else infringes on the tasks of your job description, that can be threatening. And I tend to lean more towards the mentality of a car dealership that we should build the human, not just the position. And but I'm still learning, Glenn. I don't have all the answers. I think right now at the employees that we're at, and we're you're right, actively hiring people that I've never met yet. Trust plays a big role in that, but who I do trust is the people that are making the hires. They know me, they know Chris, my business partner, really, really well. They understand because we're on the front line fighting the fight every single day. So I trust in that.
No, I think that's, again, and that idea of scaling and going back to the conversation point about someone wanting to do it all, because I've consult, and to your point is my job when I go in to consult for a dealership or any business is to say, I should be out of here in 6 months based on this project. If you want another project, different conversation, but I shouldn't be creating a job for myself forever, because then I'm not solving the problem. But same thing when you're giving that trust to somebody, saying that I can't oversee 70 people, but I can oversee 6 who each have 10 or 12 and trust them and work through them, versus I have to get in there. Because to that point of, if I'm constantly in there over here for a month, here for a month, here for a month, here for a month, nothing's moving forward because everybody's waiting for me, or we're creating dependencies where they can't move forward without me. And that's why I went back with that consulting thing, is I've seen consultants create jobs for themselves where they need me to survive, versus I should be training myself again out of a job. So very similar is let go and really focus and say, my new team is this many people, if that makes sense.
It does, especially if you're making space to grow yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So talk to me about the growth of Vincue, because again, it started out, and I've been on the sidelines, a fan, just watching this, and every day there's a new, aspect of it, or a new feature of it. So scaling is not easy, because, as I've said, the focus of the leader is the focus of the team. So is this an evolution of the initial product? Is this, well, the product's over here and now we have a completely different product? How does that function, one, for the product, and then also from a leadership standpoint to be able to guide this whole machine, because it's growing?
So in order to understand where we're going, I think I should share where we came from. And Glenn, I don't know if I've ever told you this story 100%, but so I grew up in a car dealership. My parents came over in '79 from Ukraine, and my dad joined with a business partner and created a small little car dealership that focused on selling cars in the $3,000 to $12,000 price range. That was our market, because we knew those customers didn't have other cars in the parking garage, in the garage. So we
Right.
knew that if we did a good job, we would earn them for life. So in 2000, my dad went shopping to Sears to buy his first computer. And we bought a first computer from this guy, and that guy, we asked him if he knew how to use a computer as far as installing it and writing programming. He said, yep. We paid him to come to the car dealership to install it. He installed it. We asked him if he could program any code, and he said, yep. And he wrote our first point of sale system, where we can get away from doing press hard 3 copies
Right.
bill of sales. And he figured out, he watched us go outside and take pictures of all of our cars to put in Auto Trader magazine and Auto Mart magazine, and then in the beginning, early, also in different websites. And he ended up building a company called Vin Stickers that turned into Vin Solutions. That's Matt Watson.
Mm-hmm.
Matt and I grew up together, and roughly in 2015, I did not like the way that back to this idea of pain pushes, vision pulls. I did not like the way that our inventory was being put online and being what I call superlatized. So fair deal, good deal, great deal.
Right.
I thought that was nonsense, because, and I still do to an extent, because there's so much more than year, make, model, geography, and price. There is reconditioning, there's certification, there's dealer exclusive items such as a warranty and trade guarantees and all sorts of stuff that add value to it that
Right.
isn't just about the asset. The way I was raised is to not complain, but do something about it. At my dealership, I watched how my employees would look at data on a screen and make decisions that would immediately impact the profit and loss. And so Matt and I started going to breakfast a couple times a week in the mornings, and I had this idea of how I was going to solve this. And at some point, about 2 months into it, he goes, "Hey, I know a guy who has the beginnings of something that I think you two should come together. He's a brilliant programmer, and I think you may have the vision." So that's Chris Hoke. And so Chris was a developer for Vin Solutions. And then when they got acquired, he decided to start, at the time it was called DealerQ. And DealerQ was meant to have different products. Well, the beginnings of our system was an appraisal tool. And that appraisal tool had different insights to be able to give dealers the ability to look at an appraisal differently.
Right.
And so Chris and I got together and began really thinking about what the future of modern retailing should look like, and how to end the race to the bottom, or how to begin to end the race to the bottom. And that really started with acquisition. And those are things that my dad taught me as I watched him go from new car dealer to new car dealer back in the day. And we had a strategy called WAR. WAR stands for wholesale auction retail. We'd buy all their new car trades, and then we'd move the money around and then get them on our lot and redistribute out to the market. Well, how do we digitize this in a way to give our dealers the ability to have a WAR strategy and have what we call a highest authentic value strategy, where we can actually buy vehicles that outperform the market versus underperform the market? And these ideas were all ideas. The execution of it, back to that idea of a fully formed future, is quite different. It's hard, because something I'll tell you that I learned is process is wrapped around technology, not the other way around. Technology scales process. If the technology sucks, you're going to scale bad process. If the technology is awesome, you're going to scale good process, is the linear way of thinking about it. And so we wanted to create technology that allowed dealers to outperform the market on an acquisition, which is why in the early days, we started with the ability to buy directly from the public. And our system gave dealers that ability to start getting away from buying from the auction. To create a vehicle lifecycle solution like ours, unfortunately, you can't just flip a switch and say, hey, it's ready, it's baked. It's an evolving thing that we do releases every 2 weeks right now that continue to enhance our product. Then, as our inventory management system started maturing, we were able to start winning more what we call core business. Core business is the ability to manage everything from point of appraisal to point of sale outside of a CRM and a DMS. And that's our inventory is our zone of genius. And so everything we do today is to be able to outperform the market on the acquisition and then outperform the market on the sale, and eliminate that race to the bottom.
I love that, because I have dealers who are using the product and understanding how that went. And I like that idea of process and technology go hand in hand. And I always say an idea of the process should be in place so that you can find the right technology to enhance your process. Laying a process sometimes on top of technology may or may not work for you if you haven't thought about what's best for, because then you end up getting maybe the wrong technology. So I love the way that works, because I fully agree that they go hand in hand, and it can accelerate. But as a previous guest said, when you're scaling your business, if you don't know what your processes are and you just want to scale, you scale the good and the bad. And understanding the bad, what's there, and is that really something we want to scale? So, her advice, Krista Grasso, a few episodes ago, she said, before you even think of scaling, go look at what you want to scale. And I thought that was so brilliant, because most people just say, we want to go from X to Y, and then they don't realize all the negative things that they're scaling. But what I love about that is that idea also of outside the CRM and the DMS, because one, those are very controlled environments, and there's also a lot of duplication and things, and just to pull that outside, because I think that idea of buying from consumers really was something that independent dealers thought of first, because that's where they have to get cars from, and new car franchises really relied on trades and things of that nature. But when COVID sort of shut down and supply chain went down, and all of a sudden the number of new cars produced in 2020 and 21 dropped, that's your used car market. And to your point is, if you're only willing, or shouldn't say willing, if your only avenue to access vehicles is at the auction, you're at you have to deal with all of the fees, and you're in their market versus being able to go advertise straight to consumers. And I think that's where your product has really helped a lot of my new car clients, because it allows them to go to market and say, we'll buy your car, where most people may not think that, well, this Ford dealer would buy my Chevy Silverado. And the Ford dealer would say, yes, because I can sell that as a used car. So I really love that for the consumer also. It's helping them be able to sell their car to more people as well. So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
So you asked about scale, and as you were describing all that, there's something we learned this last year that I think is just now shaping in our scaling. We always thought that we needed to be the providers of the genius, meaning as a technology company, our customers are always looking for what content can we provide them so they can continue to get better. And I think the biggest lesson we learned at the stage of the company we're in now is it's not as much anymore about what we can provide them from a content perspective, but how can we unlock our own clients to meet other clients so that they can unleash the potential within each other. And so we're really double downing on that from the performance side, because when we can connect dealers to work together, then magic happens. Because the other mantra that I really like to say is innovation happens on the front line, not here. Here's where we cement the innovation, but it's happening at the car dealership. It's happening in trade appraisal processes. It's happening in pricing strategies. It's happening in acquisition strategies. That's the innovation. That's why I still have a car dealership, because that's the lab. Here is where we take that and turn it into technology that scales process.
See, I like that. And I think I understood. So I'm going to throw this out because maybe somebody else, if I'm a little confused, maybe some of the listeners are as well. So are you saying that you're creating your own, I don't want to say auction, but you're almost saying that you're creating your own little network of dealer trades? Because I know people search all the time, but now are you saying that if I'm a dealer on the platform, I can see other people's inventory on the platform, so I could go shop on the platform to another dealer to get something that might work in my market versus theirs?
Uh, it,
Never mind. If you can't say, you can't say. I'm
no,
just,
it's no
my
problem.
brain
It's
is
no
just
problem.
going like, oh, is this?
So
Tell me.
before I go there, let me take it a step back. What I meant by unleash and unlock is really the process. Like earlier, you said if the only place that you have avenues to buy cars is the auction, then during COVID you were stuck, right?
Mhm.
The way I would change that for you, Glenn, is to say if the only talent or expertise or process or ability you had was to buy from the auction, then yeah, you needed to learn a new talent. You needed to learn a new expertise, right? That's from a human level. And when we unlock or unleash dealers with talents, abilities, because they've pain
Right.
pushes and pulls with others, then it helps everyone get better. And
So
so
they're
that's,
sharing their expertise of how to
yeah,
leverage
that's right.
Vincue. So it becomes almost like a 20 group where we share best practices of using the tool. Got it. Okay.
That's right.
There we
But
go.
to your second point, yes, on our platform, you do have the ability to also, because our system is based in a buying plan, and that buying plan is taking in millions of signals around market demand data and competitor demand data and your own sales and audience information to really help create an ideal inventory for each dealer, so that we can get away from thinking just right car, right price, but also right car, right lot. So for dealer groups specifically, when you do centralized pricing or appraising, if that is a strategy, then a GSM at a store might be thinking, how is this car going to perform here? Where somebody that manages a group of stores may be thinking, where is that car going to perform the best?
Right. I see what you're saying. That makes complete sense. That makes, yeah, because especially with the larger groups where they can move it within their own, sometimes they're across different cities, sometimes across states, where they can move things to maximize the value of that car. I love that. So as we wrap up, because we want to be conscious of time here, I have one more question. So for you as a leader, what's changed in your day to day from when you started Vincue? Because you say you're on the front lines, but I know now with 70 people and a lot, is there a difference? Is your focus different? Is your, or it has something lessened, meaning I have less time to be in the lab, more or less the dealership, or I'm here? What's changed over the last 3 years in terms of what you're doing, your impact on the company?
I'm less in growing the company and more focused on growing the people in the company.
Mm.
That's the number one answer. If I think about how I spend my time, I'm spending my time with individuals to help them fail to the level of their training, and they need to continue to fail at a higher level, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. That to me, what you just said there, that's what I think leaders should be focusing on is, and I like that, failing at the level of their training. And then that means I have to give them more training to get them to that next level so they can fail at a higher level. And that, I think we have a tendency for some leaders to be trying to manage the end result and not manage the people, or not invest in the people. And someone said it the other day, I thought it was spot on. Poor leaders focus on their employees as an expense. So you're always looking to trim or cut or do more with less. versus looking at them as an asset. Because when you have your house and you're that's an asset, and I want to be able to sell it for more. So what do? Well, I invest in painting and maybe a new roof and landscaping or whatever it is. So I'm investing to make it more valuable. You're not expensing it and then wondering why it didn't spend more. So the more that, and that's what it sounds like you're doing, is you're really you see your people as an asset to the company, not as an expense.
Still with me?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, we froze up just for 5 seconds there at the end.
That's all right. But did you hear that?
I did.
Okay. And what are your thoughts about? I mean, you do think of them. I mean, it sounds like you think of your employees as assets.
100%. Yeah. But I didn't. Here's what I will be very honest in saying. I didn't have that clear of an image when I first came into the idea of helping this company scale. I just knew that I love mentors, and I knew that I had something to offer. And I stopped worrying about with them, what's in it for me, or what's in it for them. And I started really being pulled by vision. And I think the side effect or the result of that today is we have a lot of really amazing assets here.
That's great. I love that. See, now I love the way people talk about that. All right. Well, listen, Danny, this is great. At the end of every episode, I ask a few questions, and then we'll get all of your places where people can connect with you. And folks, you should connect with Danny. He's a great leader, great individual. All right. So 3 questions. Don't even think about it, just off the top of your head. So what are you reading, listening to, or watching that's inspiring you? And again, you keep talking about mentors, but what things are you consuming that are inspiring you to get better that you could share with everyone else?
There's a book called Contagious. It's about contagious campaigns, advertising, things like that. I'm reading it right now. It's amazing. Another show that I'm watching is older, but it's called Oprah's Masterclass, because I do love watching people talk about their life in the past tense, because it's really interesting to know how they valued the time that they had and where they really enjoyed it and where they didn't. So those 2 things.
Great. Now you have your family and things like that, and I know you do travel and things like that, and you want to give your children all of the experiences, like you said, and try to unlock their superpowers. Where is there a place that you haven't been to yet that you want to take the family?
The biggest gift my parents gave me was travel, because I got to see the world and culture differently. I've never been to Paris, and I've oddly been called to go there, or Spain, Madrid, Barcelona. Like, I really want to go. I think that would be amazing. I love good food. I love experiences. All I need is a backpack. I don't really care about staying anywhere fancy. I want to accumulate experiences for me and for my family.
That's great. Yeah, we just took our boys. My oldest we're taking him to college in a couple of days, and all of a sudden that happened. You went from 10 years old to going to college like that. But we just went to Italy, and we went to London, and just for them to see what was most impactful. My son was intimidated from college interviews, saying, "Well, you could study abroad," and he thought, "I don't know if I could make it." All of a sudden, when he was in London and he was in Florence and a few other cities, he said, "I could see myself here," because he saw people just getting on with their regular day.
Yeah,
and he saw that it was normal. And he thought, and all of a sudden you just saw him relax. And that, to your point, that's what I want him to see. Things are different, but at the end of the day, people have to get up, go to work, get their food, shop,
right.
clean, and do all of that. One last question. Out of this whole conversation today, if there was one thing that you hope the audience takes away from this conversation, what's that one thing?
The idea of assets. You are your team's asset. Don't underestimate that. You are worth what you know, not what you do. And so get out there and learn and gain those experiences, because that's the impact that you're going to make in this world.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Well, I could sit here. I say this a lot, but it's really great when I have people on here that time just flies and we're just talking and you still go, there's so much more to have conversations about, but we can always come back and do more. How can people connect with you? Where do they find you? We'll put everything in the show notes. So where can people connect with you?
I'm pretty out there. So LinkedIn obviously is Danny Zaslavsky, common spelling for the last name. Facebook, but Vincue, Vincue.com. Check it out. And if I could make one shameless plug, we're doing our first conference ever, and we're calling it Unleashed. So I encourage you to check out VincueUnleashed.com because it is this idea of unleashing potential. It's the culmination of our vision and our dreams of bringing people and unleashing each other to each other, so that we can grow together. Put
all of that in the show notes so that they can go there. So again, Danny, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with the audience. There's so much great information here. So audience, you know the drill. If you found value, and I'm sure you did, please make sure you share this out. There's someone in your network that I'm sure could benefit from what Danny said. If you really did find value, don't forget to click the like, subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. We're here every single week. And as always, the fact that you spend time with us today, I know there's a lot of places for you to consume content. The fact that you spend time with Danny and myself means the world to me. So again, at the end of every episode, we say you're in charge, but now Danny gave you a few more tools to put in your toolkit to help you become the person and leader that you want, both personally and professionally. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you next episode. Danny, I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Glenn.
Take care.